We present on the cross, a romance of the Passion Play at Oberammergau by Wilhelmine von Hillern, a public domain work. Chapter 8. Freya, the play was over. Christ is risen! He had burst the sepulchre and hurled the guards in the dust by the sight of his radiant apparition. He had appeared to the penitent as a simple gardener early in the morning, as he had promised, and at last had been transfigured and had risen above the world, bearing in his hand a standard of victory. A flood of human beings poured out of the close theatre into the open air, not loudly and noisily as they had come. No, reverently and gravely, as a funeral train disperses after the obsequies of some noble man, noiselessly as the ebbing tide recedes after flood raised by a storm. These were the same people, yet they returned in a far different mood. The same vehicles in which yesterday the travellers had arrived in so noisy a fashion now bore them away, but neither shouts nor cracking of whips was heard. The drivers knew that they must behave as if their carriages were filled with wounded men, and this was true. There was scarcely one who did not suffer as if the spear which had pierced the Saviour's heart had entered his own, who did not feel the wounds of the crucified one in his own hands and feet. The grief which the people took with them was grand and godlike, and they treasured it carefully. They did not desire to lose any portion of it, for we love the grief we feel for one beloved, and today they had learned to love Christ, so they went homeward. The last carriages which drew up before the entrance were those of the Countess and her friends. The gentlemen of the diplomatic corps were already standing below, waiting for Countess Wildenau to assign them their seats in the two landaus. But the lady was still leaning against the pillar which supported one end of the box. Pressing her handkerchief to her eyes, she vainly strove to control her tears. Her heart throbbed violently, her breath was short and quick. She could not master her emotion. The prince stood before her, pale and silent. His eyes too were reddened by weeping. "Try to calm yourself," he said firmly. "The ladies are still in their box. The Duchess seems to expect you to go to her. A woman of the world, like yourself, should not give way so." "Give way, do you call it?" repeated Madeleine, who did not see that Prince Emil too was moved. "We shall never understand each other." At this moment the ladies left their box and crossed the intervening space. They were the last persons in the theatre. The Duchess, without a word, threw her arms around Countess von Wildenau's neck. Her ladies, in waiting too, approached with tearful eyes, and when the Duchess at last released her friend from her embrace, the Baroness whispered, "Forgive me, I have wronged you as well as many others, even yesterday forgive me." The same entreaty was expressed in Her Excellency's glance and clasp of the hand as she said, "Whoever sees this must repent every unloving word ever uttered. May we never forget that we have witnessed it together. I thank you, but I should have borne you no ill will, even had I known what you have now voluntarily confessed to me," replied the Countess, kissing the ladies with dry, burning lips. "Shall we go?" asked the Duchess. "We shall be locked in." "I will come directly, I beg you. Will your Highness kindly go first? I should like to rest a moment," stammered the Countess in great confusion. "You are terribly unstrung, that is natural, so are we all. I will wait for you below and take you in my carriage if you wish." "We can weep our fill together, your Highnesses." "Very kind," replied the Countess, scarcely knowing what she answered. When the party had gone downstairs, she passionately seized Prince Emil's arm. "For heaven's sake, help me to escape going with them. I will not, cannot leave. I beseech you by all that is sacred, let me stay here." "So it is settled. The result is what I feared," said the prince with a heavy sigh. "I can only beg you for your own sake to consider the ladies. You have invited them to dine day after tomorrow. I know it. Apologize for me. Say whatever you please. You will know. You can manage it, if you have ever loved me. Help me. Drive with the ladies. Entertain them, that they may not miss me. And the magnificent ovation which the gentlemen have arranged at your home. What do I care for it? A fairy temple awaits you at the Palace Wildenau, and you will stay here. What a pity to lose the beautiful flowers, which must now wither in vain. I cannot help it. For heaven's sake, act quickly. Someone is coming." She was trembling in every limb with fear, but it was no member of the party sent to summon her. A short man with clear-cut features stood beside her. Shrewd, loyal eyes met her glance. "I saw that you were still here, Countess. Can I serve you in any way?" "Thank heaven, it is Ludwig Gross," cried the excited woman joyously, taking his arm. "Can you get me to your father's house without being seen?" "Certainly, I can guide you across the stage if you wish." "Quick, then, Farewell, Prince. Be generous and forgive me." She vanished. The prince was too thoroughly a man of the world to betray his feelings even for an instant. The short distance down the staircase afforded him ample time to decide upon his course. The misfortune had happened and could no longer be averted, but it concerned himself alone. Her name and position must be guarded. "Have you come without the Countess?" called the Duchess. "I must apologize for her, Your Highness. The performance has so completely unstrung her nerves that she is unable to travel today. I have just placed her in her landlord's charge, promising not only to make her apologies to the ladies, but also endeavour to supply her place." "Oh, poor Countess Wildenau," said the Duchess kindly. "Shall we not go to her assistance? Permit me to remind Your Highness that we have not a moment to lose if we wish to catch the train. Is it possible? Then we must hurry." "Yes, and I think rest will be best for the Countess at present," answered Prince Emil, helping the ladies into the carriage. "Well, we shall see her at dinner on Tuesday. She will be able to travel tomorrow." "Oh, I hope so. But Prince Emil, what will become of our flowers?" asked the gentleman. "Oh, they will keep until tomorrow. I suppose she has no suspicion." "Of course not, and it is far better, for had she been aware of it, no doubt she would have gone today, in spite of her illness." "And made herself worse," the gentleman assented. "Still, it's a pity about the flowers. If they will only keep fresh, she will let many a blossom wither, which may well be mourned," thought the prince bitterly. "Will you drive with us, Prince?" asked the Duchess. "If Your Highness will permit, will you go to the casino tonight, as we agreed, gentlemen?" he called as he entered the vehicle. "Not I," replied Prince Hohenheim. "I honestly confess that I am not in the mood." "Nor I," said Stangernois. "This has moved me to that. The finest circus in the world might be here, and I would not enter." The burgomaster of Ammergau was right in permitting nothing of the kind. "Yes, I will take back everything I said yesterday. I went to laugh and wept," remarked Wengenrode. "It has robbed me of all desire for amusement," Cossini added. "I care for nothing more today." They bowed to the ladies and the prince, and silently entered their carriages. Prince Emil ordered the Countess's coachman to drive back with the maid, who sat hidden in one corner, and joined the Duchess and her companions. The equipages rolled away in different directions, one back to the Gross House, the other to Munich, where the florists were toiling busily to adorn the Wildenau Palace for the reception of its fortunate owner, who was not coming. Ludwig Gross led the Countess across the now empty stage. It thrilled her with a strange emotion to thread its floor, and in her reverent awe she scarcely ventured to glance around her at the vast, dusky space. Suddenly she recoiled from an unexpected horror. The cross lay before her. Her agitation did not escape the keen perception of Ludwig Gross, and he doubtless understood it. Such things are not new to the people of Ammergau. "I will see whether the house of Pilate is still open. Perhaps you may like to step out on the balcony," he said, and moved away to leave her alone. The Countess understood the consideration displayed by the sympathizing man. Kneeling in the dark wings, she threw herself face downward on the cross, pressed her burning lips on the hard wood which had supported the noble body, on the marks left here also by the nails which had apparently pierced the hands of the crucified one, the red stains made by his painted wounds. Aye, it had become true, the miracle had happened. The artificial blood also possessed redeeming power. Rarely did any pilgrim to the Holy Land ever press a more fervent kiss upon the wood of the true cross than was now bestowed on the false one. So, in the days of yore, Helen, the beautiful, haughty mother of the Emperor Constantine, may have flung herself down, after her long sea voyage, when she at last found the long-sought cross, to press it to her bosom in the unutterable joy of realization. Ludwig's steps approached, and the Countess roused herself from her rapture. "Unfortunately, the house is closed," said Ludwig, who had probably been perfectly aware of it. They went on to the dressing rooms. "I'll see if Freya is still here." And the drawing-master knocked at the first door. The Countess was so much startled that she was forced to lean against the wall to save herself from falling. Was it to come now, the fateful moment? Her knees threatened to give way, her heart throbbed almost to bursting. But there was no answer to the knock, thrice repeated. He was no longer there. Ludwig Gross opened the door. The room was empty. "Will you come in?" he asked. "Would it interest you to see the dressing-room?" She entered. There hang his garments, still damp with perspiration from the severe toil. Madeleine von Wildenau stooped with clasped hands in the bare little chamber. Something white and glimmering rustled and floated beside her. It was the transfiguration robe. She touched it lightly with her hand in passing, and a thrill of bliss ran through every nerve. Ah, and there was the crown of thorns. She took it in her hand, and tears streamed down upon it, as though it was some sacred relic. Again the dream-like vision stood before her, as she had seen it for the first time on the mountain-top, with the thorny branches swaying around the brow like an omen. No, my hands shall defend thee, that no thorn shall henceforth tear thee, beloved brow, she thought, while a strange smile irradiated her face. Then, looking up, she met the eyes of Ludwig, fixed upon her with deep emotion as she gazed down at the crown of thorns. She replaced it and followed him to the door of the next room. Caiaphas! An almost childlike dread and timidity assailed her. The sort of feeling she had had when a young girl at the time of her first presentation at court. She was well-nigh glad that he was no longer there, and she had time to calm herself ere she confronted the mighty priest. "It is too late, they have all gone," said Ludwig, offering his companion his arm to lead her down the staircase. Numerous groups of people were standing in front of the theatre and in the street leading to the village. "What are they doing here?" asked the lady. "Oh, they are waiting for Freya. It is always so." He has slipped around again by a side path to avoid seeing anyone, and the poor people must stand and wait in vain. I have often told him that he ought not to be so austere. It would please them so much if he would, but give them one friendly word. But he cannot conquer this shyness. He cannot suffer himself to be revered as the Christ after the play is over. He ought not to permit the feeling which the people have for the Christ to be transferred to his person. That is his view of the matter. It is a lofty and noble thought, but hard for us poor mortals, who so eagerly cling to what is visible. It is impossible not to transfer the impression produced by the character to its representative, especially with a personality like Freya's. Ludwig Gross nodded assent. Yes, we have had this experience of old. Faith needs an earthly pledge, says our great poet, and Freya's personation is such a pledge, a guarantee of whose blessed power everyone feels sure. The Countess eagerly pressed Ludwig's hands. "I have seen people," Ludwig added, "who were happy if they were only permitted to touch Freya's garment, as though it could bring them healing like the actual robe of Christ. Would not Christ also, if he beheld this pious delusion, exclaim, 'Woman, thy faith hath saved thee'?" A deep flush crimsoned the Countess' face, and the tears which she had so long struggled to repress flowed in streams. She leaned heavily on Ludwig's arm, and he felt the violent throbbing of her heart. It touched him and awakened his compassion. He perceived that hers, too, was a suffering soul seeking salvation here, and if she did not find it, would perish. "It shall be yours, poor woman, for rich as you may be, you are still poor, and we will give you what we can," he thought. The two companions pursued their way, without exchanging another word. The Countess now greeted the old house like a lost home which she had once more regained. Andreas Gross met her at the door, took off her shawl, and carried it into the room for her. Josepha had already returned and said that the Countess was ill. "I hope it is nothing serious?" he asked anxiously. "No, Herr Gross, I am well, but I cannot go. I must make the acquaintance of these people. I cannot tear myself away from this impression." She sank into a chair, laid her head on the table, and sobbed like a child. "Forgive me, Herr Gross, I cannot help it," she said with difficulty, amid her tears. The old man laid his hand upon her shoulder with a gesture of paternal kindness. "Weep your fill, we are accustomed to it, do not heed us." He drew her gently into the sitting-room. Ludwig had vanished. Josepha entered to ask whether she should unpack the luggage which was up in her room. "Yes," replied the Countess, "and let the carriages return to Munich until I need them again." "His Highness the Prince has left his valet here for your service," Josepha reported. "What can he do? Let him go home too. Let them all go. I want no one except you," said the Countess sternly, hiding her face again in her handkerchief. Josepha went out to give the order. Where could Ludwig Gross be? He had become a necessity to her now, thus left alone with her overflowing heart. He had been right in everything. He had told her that she would learn to weep here. He had first made her understand the spirit of Ammergau. Honour and gratitude were his due. He had promised nothing that had not been fulfilled. He was thoroughly genuine and reliable. But where had he gone? Did not this man, usually so sympathetic, know that just now he might be of great help to her? Or did he look deeper still, and know that he was but a substitute for another, for whom her whole soul yearned? It was so lonely. A death-like stillness reigned in the house and in the street. All were resting after the heavy toil of the day. Something outside darkened the window. Ludwig Gross was passing on his way toward the door, bringing with him a tan, dark figure, towering far above the low window, a figure that moved shyly, swiftly along, followed by a throng of people at a respectful distance. The Countess felt paralyzed. Was he coming? Was he coming in? She could not rise and look. She sat with clasped hands, trembling in humble expectation, as Danae waited the moment when the shower of gold should fall. Then, steps echoed in the workshop, the footsteps of two. They were an eternity in passing down its length, but they were really approaching her room. They came nearer. Someone knocked. She scarcely had breath to call, "Come in." She would not believe it, from the fear of disappointment. She still sat motionless at the table. Ludwig Gross opened the door to allow the other to precede him, and Freya entered. He stooped slightly, that he might not strike his head, but that was needless, for what miracle was this? The door expanded before the Countess's eyes. The ceiling rose higher and higher above him. A wide, lofty space filled with dazzling light surrounded him. Colours glittered before her vision. Figures floated to and fro. Were they shadows or angels? She knew not. A mist veiled her eyes. For a moment she ceased to think. Then she felt as if she had awaked from a deep slumber, during which she had been walking in her sleep. For she suddenly found herself face to face with Freya. He was holding her hands in his, while his eyes rested on hers, in speechless silence. Then she regained her self-control, and the first words she uttered were addressed to Ludwig. "You have brought him," she said, releasing Freya's hands to thank the man who had so wonderfully guessed her yearning. Gift and gratitude were equal, and here both were measureless. She scarcely knew at this moment which she valued more, the man who brought this donation or the gift itself. But from this hour, Ludwig Gross was her benefactor. "You have brought him," she repeated, for she knew not what more to say. That one word contained all. Had she possessed the eloquence of the universe, it would not have been so much to Ludwig as that one word and the look which accompanied it. Then, like a child at Christmas, which, after having expressed its thanks, goes back happily to its presents, she turned again to Freya. Yet, as the child stands timidly before the abundance of its gifts, and, in the first moments of surprise, does not venture to touch them, she now stood, shy and silent before him, her only language her eyes, and the tears which streamed down her cheeks. Freya saw her deep emotion, and bending kindly toward her, again took her hands in his. Every nerve was still quivering. She could feel it, from the terrible exertion he had undergone, and as the moisture drips from the trees after the rain, his eyes still swam in tears, and his face was damp with perspiration. "How shall I thank you for coming to me after this day of toil?" she began in a low tone. "Oh, Countess," he answered with untroubled truthfulness, "I did it for the sake of my friend Ludwig. He insisted upon it." So it was only on his friend's account, thought the Countess, standing with bowed head before him. He was now the king, and she, the queen of her brilliant sphere, was nothing save a poor, hoping, fearing woman. At this moment all the vanity of her worldly splendour fell from her. For the first time in her life she stood in the presence of a man where she was the supplicant, he the benefactor. What a feeling! At once humiliating and blissful, confusing and enthralling. She had recognized by that one sentence the real state of the case. What to this man was the halo surrounding the Reichscountess von Wildenau with her coronet and her millions? Joseph Freya knew but one aristocracy, that of the saints in whose sphere he was accustomed to move, and if he left it for the sake of an earthly woman, he would stoop to her, no matter how far, according to worldly ideals, she might stand above him. Yet poor and insignificant as she felt in his presence, while the lustre of her coronet and the glitter of her gold paled and vanished in the misty distance, one thing remained on which she could rely, her womanly charm, and this must wield its influence, were she a queen or the child of a woodcutter. "Then for the earthly crown you have torn from my head, proud man, you shall give me your crown of thorns, and I will still be queen," she thought, as the spirit of Mother Eve stirred within her, and an intoxicating breeze blew from the garden of paradise. Not for the sake of the base emotion of vanity and covetousness, nay, she wished to be loved in order to bless. It is the nature of a noble woman to seek to use her power not to receive, but to give without stint or measure. The brain thinks quickly, but the heart is swifter still. Ere the mind has time to grasp the thought, the heart has seized it. The Countess had experienced all this in the brief space during which Freya's eyes rested on her. Suddenly he lowered his lashes and said in a whisper, "I think we have met before, Countess. On my arrival Friday evening. You were standing on the top of the mountain while I was driving at the foot. Was it not so?" "Yes," he murmured almost inaudibly, and there was something like an understanding, a sweet familiarity in the soft assent. She felt it, and her hand clasped his more firmly with a gentle pressure. He again raised his lashes, gazing at her with an earnest, questioning glance, and it seemed as if she felt a pulse throbbing in the part of the hand which bore the mark of the wound. The warning did not fail to produce its effect. "Christus, my Christus," she whispered repentantly. It seemed as if she had committed a sin in suffering an earthly wish to touch the envoy of God. He was crucified, dead, and buried. He only walked on earth like a spirit permitted to return from time to time and dwell for a brief space among the living. Who could claim a spirit, clasp a shadow to the heart? Grief oppressed her, melancholy, akin to the grief we feel when we dream of the return of some beloved one who is dead, and throw ourselves sobbing on his breast, while we are aware that it is only a dream. But even if but a dream, should she not dream it with her whole soul? If she knew that he was given to her only a few moments, should she not crowd into them with all the sweeter, more sorrowful strength, the love of a whole life? After us the deluge says love to the moment, and that which does not say it is not love. But in this moment the Countess felt lay the germ of something imperishable, and when it was past there would begin for her not annihilation but eternity. To it she must answer for what she did with the moment. Ludwig Gross was standing by the window. He did not wish to listen what was communicated by the mute language of those eyes. He had perceived, with subtle instinct, the existence of some mysterious connection in which no third person had any part. They were alone, virtually alone, yet neither spoke. Only their tearful eyes expressed the suffering which he endured and she shared in beholding. "Come, poor martyr," cried her heart, and she released one of his hands to clasp the other more closely with both her own. She noticed a slight quiver. "Does your hand still ache, from the terrible nail which seemed to be driven into your flesh?" "Oh no, that would cause no pain. The nail passes between the fingers and the large head extends toward the center of the palm. But today, by accident, Joseph of Arimathea in drawing out the nail took a piece of the flesh with it, so that I clenched my teeth with the pain," he said, smiling, and showing her the wound. "Do you see? Now I am really stigmatized. Good heavens, there is a large piece of the flesh torn out, and you bore it without wincing." "Why, of course," he said simply. Ludwig gazed fixedly out of the window. The Countess had gently drawn the wounded hand nearer and nearer. Suddenly forgetting everything in an unutterable feeling, she stooped, and ere Freya could prevent it, pressed a kiss upon the bloody stigma. Joseph Freya shrank as though struck by a thunderbolt, drawing back his hand and closing it, as if against some costly gift which he dared not accept. A deep flush crimsoned his brow, his broad chest heaved passionately, and he was obliged to cling to a chair to save himself from falling. Yet unconsciously his eyes flashed with a fire at once consuming and life-bestowing, a Prometheus spark. "You are weary, pardon me for not having asked you to sit down long ago," said the Countess, making an effort to calm herself and motioning to Ludwig Gross in order not to leave him standing alone. "Only a moment," whispered Freya, also struggling to maintain his composure as he sank into a chair. Madeleine von Wildenau turned away to give him time to regain his self-command. She saw his intense emotion, and might perhaps have been ashamed of her hasty act had she not known its meaning. For her feeling at that moment was too sacred for him to have misunderstood it. Nor had he failed to comprehend, but it had overpowered him. Ludwig, who dearly perceived the situation, interposed with his usual tact to relieve their embarrassment. "Freya is particularly exhausted today," he told me, on our way here, that he had again been taken from the cross senseless. "Good heavens, does that happen often?" asked the Countess, unfortunately. "Yes," said Ludwig in a troubled tone. "It is terrible. Your father told me that the long suspension on the cross was dangerous." "Can nothing be done to relieve it?" "Something might be accomplished," replied Ludwig, "by substituting a flat cross for the rounded one. Formerly, when we had a smooth, angular one, it did not tax his strength so much, but some authority in archaeology told us that the crosses of those days were made of semicircular logs, and this curve over which the back is now strained stretches the limbs too much." "I should think so," cried the Countess in horror. "Why do you use such an instrument of torture? He himself insists upon it, for the sake of historical accuracy." But suppose you should not recover from one of these fainting fits? Asked the lady reproachfully. Then Freya, conquering his agitation, raised his head. What more beautiful fate could be mine, Countess, than to die on the cross, like my Redeemer? It is all that I desire. All, she repeated, and a keen emotion of jealousy assailed her, jealousy of the cross, to which he would fain devote his life. She met his dark eyes with a look, a sweet, yearning, fatal look, a poisoned arrow whose effect she well knew. She grudged him to the cross, the dead, wooden instrument of martyrdom, which did not feel, did not love, did not long for him as she did. And the true Christ? He was too noble to demand such a sacrifice. Besides, he would receive 2 souls for one, for surely, in his image, she loved him. He had sent her the hand marked with bloodstains to show her the path to him. He could not desire to withdraw it ere the road was traversed. You are a martyr in the true sense of the word, she said. Her eyes seemed to ask whether the shaft had struck, but Freya had lowered his lids and sat gazing at the floor. Oh, Countess, he said evasively, to have one's limbs wrenched for half an hour does not make a martyr. That suffering brings honour and the consciousness of serving others. Many, like my friend Ludwig and other natives of Ammergau, offer to our cause secret sacrifices of happiness which no audience beholds and applauds, and which win no renown save in their own eyes and God's. They are martyrs, Countess. I am merely a vain, spoiled, sinful man who has enough to do to keep himself from being dazzled by the applause of the world and to become worthy of his task. To become, the Countess repeated. I think whoever speaks in that way is worthy already. Freya raised his eyes with a look which seemed to Madeleine von Wildenau to lift her into a higher realm. Who would venture to say that he was worthy of this task? It requires a saint. All I can hope for is that God will use the imperfect tool to work his miracles, and that he will accept my will for the deed. Otherwise I should be forced to give up the part this very day. The Countess was deeply moved. O Freya, wonderful, divinely gifted nature, to us you are the Redeemer, and yet you are so severe to yourself. Do not talk so, Countess. I must not listen. I will not add to all my sins that of robbing my master, in his garb, of what belongs to him alone. You cannot suspect how it troubles me when people show me this reverence. I always long to cry out, do not confound me with him. I am nothing more than the wood, or the marble from which an image of the Christ is carved, and withal bad wood, marble which is not free from stains. And when they will not believe it, and continue to transfer to me the love which they ought to have for Christ, I feel that I am robbing my master, and no one knows how I suffer. He started up. That is why I mingle so little with others, and if I ever break this rule I repent it, for my peace of mind is destroyed. He took his hat. His whole nature seemed changed. This was the chaste severity with which he had driven the money changers from the temple, and Madeleine turned pale, chilled to the inmost heart by his inflexible bearing. Are you going? She murmured in a trembling voice. It is time, he answered gently, but with an unapproachable dignity which made the words with which she would fain have entreated him to stay longer die upon her lips. Your Highness win leave tomorrow? The Countess intends to remain some time, said Ludwig, pressing his friend's arm lightly, as a warning not to wound her feeling. Ah, replied Freya thoughtfully, then perhaps we shall meet again. I have not yet answered what you have said today. Will you permit me to do so tomorrow? Asked the Countess, gently. An expression of quiet suffering hovered around her lips. Tomorrow I play the Christ again, Countess. But doubtless some opportunity will be found within the next few days. As you please. Farewell. Freya bowed respectfully, but as distantly as if he did not think it possible that the lady would offer him her hand. Ludwig, on the contrary, as if to make amends for his friend's omission, frankly extended his. She clasped it, saying in a low, hurried tone, Stay! I will merely go with Freya to the door, and then return, if you will allow me. Yes, she said, dismissing Freya with a haughty wave of the hand. Then, throwing herself into the chair by the table, she burst into bitter weeping. She had always been surrounded by men who sued for her favour as though it were a royal gift. And here she was disdained, and by whom? A man of the people, a plebeian. No, a keen pang pierced her heart as she tried to give him that name. If he was a plebeian, so too was Christ. Christ too sprang from the people, the ideal of the human race was born in a manger. She could summon to confront him only one kind of pride, that of the woman, not of the high-born lady. Alas, she had not even this. How often she had flung her heart away without love. For the mess of pottage of gratified vanity, or an interesting situation, as the prince had said yesterday, she had bartered the birthright of the holiest feeling. Of what did she dare to be proud? That for the first time in her life she really loved. Was she to avenge herself by arrogance upon the man who had awakened this divine emotion, because he did not share it? No, that would be petty and ungrateful. Yet what could she do? He was so far above her in his unassuming simplicity, so utterly inviolable. She was captured by his nobility, her weapons were powerless against him. As she gazed around her for some support by which she might lift herself above him, every prop of her former artificial life snapped in her grasp before the grand, colossal verity of this apparition. She could do nothing save love and suffer, and accept whatever fate he bestowed. Someone knocked at the door. Almost mechanically she gave the permission to enter. Ludwig Gross came in noiselessly and approached her. Without a word she held out her hand, as a patient extends it to the physician. He stood by her side, and his eyes rested on the weeping woman with the sympathy and understanding born of experience in suffering. But his presence was infinitely soothing. This man would allow nothing to harm her. So far as his power extended, she was safe. She looked at him as if beseeching help, and he understood her. Freya was unusually excited today, he said. I do not know what was passing in his mind. I never saw him in such a mood before. When we entered the garden, he embraced me as if something extraordinary had happened, and then rushed off as though the ground was burning under his feet. Of course, in the direction opposite to his home, for the whole street was full of people waiting to see him. The Countess held her breath to listen. Was he in this mood when you called for him? She asked. No, he was as usual, calm and weary. What changed him so suddenly? I believe, Countess, that you have made an impression upon him which he desires to understand. You have thrown him out of the regular routine, and he no longer comprehends his own feelings. But I said so little. I don't understand, cried the Countess, blushing. The important point does not always depend on what is said, but on what is not said, Countess. To deep souls, what is unuttered is often more significant than words. Madeleine von Wildenau lowered her eyes and silently clasped Ludwig's hand. Do you think that he— She did not finish the sentence. Ludwig spared her. From my knowledge of Freya, either he will never return or he will come tomorrow. Chapter 9. Signs, and wonders. The great number of strangers who were unable to get tickets the day before had rendered a second performance necessary. The Countess did not attend it. To her the play had been no spectacle but an experience. A repetition would have degraded it to a mere drama. She had spent the day in retirement, like a prisoner, that she might not fall into the hands of any acquaintances. Now the distant rumble of carriages announced the close of the performance. It was a delightful autumn evening. The Gross family came to the window on their return home, and wondered to find the Countess still in her room. The sounds of stifled sobs echoed from the workroom. The other lodgers in the house had come back from the theatre, and, like everyone, were paying their tribute of tears. An American had gone today for the second time. He sat weeping on the bench near the stove, and said that it had been even more touching than yesterday. Andreas Gross assented. Yes, Joseph Freya never played as he did today. The Countess, sitting in her room, heard the words and was strangely moved. Why had he never played as he did today? Someone tapped gently on the door. A burning blush suffused the Countess's face. Had he? He might have passed through the garden from the other side to avoid the spectators. Come in, she called. It was Josepha with a telegram in her hand. The messenger was waiting for an answer. The Countess opened it and read the contents. It was from the Prince. Please inform me whether I shall countermand the dinner. Very well, I will send the reply. Josepha withdrew. If Ludwig were only here, thought the Countess. He must be waiting to bring Freya as he did yesterday. The rapid pulsing of her heart almost stifled her. 1/4 of an hour passed after another. At last Ludwig came, but alone. The Countess was sitting at the open window and Ludwig paused beside it. Well, how was the play today? Magnificent, he replied. I never saw Freya so superb. He was perfect, fairly superhuman. It is a pity that you were not there. Did he inquire for me? Yes. I explained to him that you did not wish to see it a second time, and for what reason. He nodded and said, I am glad the lady feels so. Then, we understand each other. The Countess drew a long breath. Did you ask him to come here with you? No. I thought I ought not to do that. He must come now of his own free will, or you would be placed in a false position. You are right, I thank you, said the Countess, turning pale and biting her lips. Do you think that he will come? Unfortunately, no. He went directly home. Will you do me a favour? Certainly, Countess. Dispatch a telegram for me. I have arranged to give a dinner party at home and should like to send a message that I am coming. You will not remain here longer? No, she said in a tone sharp and cutting as a knife which is thrust into one's own heart. Come in, please. Ludwig obeyed the command, and she wrote with the bearing of a queen signing a death warrant. Hereditary Prince of Metten-Barnheim, Munich. Will come at 5 tomorrow. Dinner can be given. Madeline. Here, if you will be so kind, she said, handing the sheet to Ludwig. The latter gazed earnestly at her, as though he wanted to say, if only you don't repent it. But he asked the question in the modest wording, Shall I send it at once? Yes, if you please, she answered, and her whole manner expressed a coldness which startled Ludwig. Can genuine warmth of heart freeze so quickly? He asked himself. Madeleine von Wildenau felt the mute reproach and disappointment in Ludwig's manner. She felt, too, that he was right, and called him back as he reached the door. Give it to me, she said, taking the telegram. I will consider the matter. Then, meeting the eyes of the noble man, which now brightened again for her sake, she added earnestly, holding out her hand, You understand me better than I do myself. I thank you for those words. They make me very proud, Countess, said Ludwig, with a radiant glance, placing the telegram on the table. I will go now that I may not disturb you while you are considering what course to pursue. He left the room. Twilight was gathering. The Countess sat by the table holding the telegram clenched in her little hand. O people of Oberammergau unconsciously exercise a moral constraint which is irresistible. There is a power of truth in them which prevents even self-deception in their presence, she murmured half defiantly, half admiringly. What was to be done now? To remain longer here and countermand the dinner meant a positive breach with society. But who was there here to thank her for such a sacrifice? Who cared for the Countess Wildenau? She was one of the thousands who came and went, taking with them a lofty memory, without leaving any remembrance in the mind of anyone. Why should she hold them accountable if she gave to this impression a significance which was neither intended nor suspected? We must not force upon men sacrifices which they do not desire. She rested her arm on the table and sat irresolute. Now, in this mood, to return to the prosaic, superficial round, after imagining yesterday that she stood face to face with deity. Could she do it? Was not the mute reproach in Ludwig's glance true? She thoughtfully rested her beautiful face on her hand. She had not noticed a knock at the door. A carriage was driving by, whose rattle drowned every sound. For the same reason the person outside, supposing that he had not heard the come in, softly opened the door. At the noise the Countess raised her head. Freya stood before her. You have come! You did come! She exclaimed, starting up and seizing his hand that the sweet, blissful dream might not vanish once more. Excuse me if I disturb you, he said in a low, timid tone. I should not have come, but I could not bear to stay at home. I was so excited today. When evening came, some impulse drove me here. You had a desire to talk to someone who could understand you, and this urged you to me, did it not? Yes, Countess, but I should not have ventured to come in, had not. Well? Ludwig met me and said that you were going away. Ah, and did you regret it? I wished at least to bid you farewell and thank you for all your kindness to my unhappy cousin Josepha, he said evasively. I neglected to do so yesterday. I was so embarrassed. You are not sincere with me, Herr Freya, said the Countess, motioning to him to sit down. This expression of thanks does not come from your heart, for you do not care what I do for Josepha. That is merely the pretext for coming to me, because you do not wish to confess what really brought you. Am I not right? Countess, said Freya, completely disconcerted, as he tried to rise. She gently laid her hand on his, detaining him. Stay. Your standard is so rigid in everything. What is your view of truth? Freya fixed his eyes on the floor. Is it true when you say that you came to thank me for Josepha? Were you not drawn hither by the feeling that, of all the thousands of souls who pass you in the course of the summer, perhaps there is not one who could understand you in your task as I do?" Freya clasped his hands on his knees and silently bent his head. "Perhaps you've not thought of me as I have thought of you all day long, since our eyes met on the mountain, as though some higher power had pointed us out to each other." Freya remained silent, but as the full cup overflows at the slightest movement, tears again gushed from his eyes. "Why did you look at me so from head to foot, pouring forth in that gaze your whole soul with a world of grief and joy, as a blossoming tree showers its flowers on the passer by? Surely not on account of a woman's face, though it may be passably fair, but because you felt that I perceived the Christ in you, and that it was he for whom I came. Your glance meant to tell me, 'It is I whom you are seeking,' and I believe you. And when at last the promise was fulfilled, and the long-sought Redeemer stood before me, was it by chance that his prophetic eye discovered me among the thousands of faces when he said, 'But in many hearts day will soon dawn'? Did you not seek me, as we look for a stranger to whom we must fulfill a promise given on the journey?" Freya now raised his dark eyes and fixed them full upon her, but made no reply. "And is it true that you came yesterday, only because Ludwig wished it? You who, spite of all entreaties, have kept ladies who had the world at their feet waiting on your stairs for hours? Did you not come because you suspected that I might be the woman with whom, since that meeting, you had had some incomprehensible spiritual bond?" Freya covered his eyes with his hand, as if he was afraid more might be read in them. "Be truthful, Herr Freya. It is unworthy of you and of me to play a conventional farce. I am compelled to act so many in my life that I would fain for once be frank as mortal to mortal. Tell me simply, have I judged correctly, yes or no?" "Yes," whispered Freya, without looking up. She gently drew his hand down. "And today, did you come merely out of gratitude for your cousin?" she questioned with the archness of her increasing certainty of happiness. He caught the little hand with which she had clasped his and raised it ardently to his lips. Then, as if startled that he had allowed himself to be carried so far, he flung back his raven locks as if they had deluded his senses and pushed his chair farther away in order not to be again led into temptation. She did not interfere. She knew that he was in her power. Struggle as he might, the dart was fixed. Yet the obstacles she had to conquer were great and powerful. Coquetry would be futile. Only the moral force of a genuine feeling could cope with them, and of this she was conscious, with a happiness never felt before. Again she searched her own heart, and her rapid glance wandered from the thorn-scarred brow of the wonderful figure before her to pierce the depths of her own soul. Her love for him was genuine. She was not toying with his heart. She wished, like Mary Magdalene, to sanctify herself in his love. But she was the Magdalene in the first stage. Had Christ been a man, and attainable like this man, what transformations the penitent's heart must have undergone, ere its fires wrought true purification. "Herr Freya," the Countess began in a low, eager tone, "you said yesterday that it troubled you when people showed you idolatrous reverence, and you felt that you thereby robbed your master. Can we give aught to any earthly being without giving it to God?" Freya listened intently. "Is there any soul which does not belong to God, did not emanate from him, is not a part of his power? And does not that which flows from one part to another stream back in a perpetual circle to the Creator? We can take nothing which does not come from God, give nothing which does not return to him. Do you know the principle of the preservation of power?" "No," said Freya, confused by his ignorance of something he was asked. "Well, it can be explained in a very few words. Science has proved that nothing in the universe can be lost, that even a force which is apparently uselessly squandered is merely transformed into another. Thus in God nothing can be lost, even though it has no direct relation to him, for he is the spiritual universe. True, every feeling does not produce a work of God, any more than every effort of nature brings forth some positive result. But as in the latter case the force expended is not lost, because it produces other, though secondary results, so in God no sentiment of love and enthusiasm is lost, even though it may relate to him only in a secondary degree." "Very true. Then if that is so, how can anyone rob this God who surrounds us like the universe from which we come, into which we pass again, and in which our forces are constantly transformed in a perpetual round of change?" Freya rested his head on his hand, absorbed in thought. "And if a feeling is so deeply rooted in religion, so directly associated with God as that which men offer to you, his representative. Why should you have these scruples? I have never heard anyone talk in this way. Pardon my faint-heartedness and ignorance. I am a poor, simple-hearted man. You will be indulgent, will you not? Freya, cried the Countess, deeply moved, and spite of the distance to which he had pushed his chair, held out her hand. You see, I had no opportunity to attend a higher school. I was so poor. I lost my parents when a lad of 12 and received only the most necessary instruction. All my knowledge I obtained afterwards by reading, and it is of course defective and insufficient. On our mountains, beside our rushing streams, among the hazel bushes whose nuts were often my only food, I grew up, watching the horses sent to pasture with their colts. Up by St. Gregory's Chapel, where the line falls over the cliffs, I left the animals grazing in the wide meadows, flung myself down in a field of gentian, and, lying on my back, gazed upward into the blue sky, and thought it must surely open. The transparent atmosphere must at last be pierced, as the bird imagines when it dashes its head against a pane of glass. So I learned to think of God. And when my brain and heart grew giddy, as if I were destined for something better, when a longing overwhelmed me, which my simple meditations could not quell, I caught one of my young horses by the mane, swung myself on its bare back, and swept over the broad plain, feeling myself a king. He extended his arms, and now his face was suddenly transformed, laughing, bright, joyous as the Swedes imagine their neck, the kind, friendly water sprite who still retains some of the mythical blood of the northern god of spring, Freya's namesake. Ah, Countess, that was poetry. Who could restore those days, that childish ignorance, that happy hope, that freedom of innocence? Again, like the pictures in a kaleidoscope, his expression changed, and a gloomy melancholy spread its veil over his brow. Alas, that is all over. My light-footed colts have become weary, clumsy animals, dragging loaded wains, and I drag no less wearily the burden of life. How can you speak so at the moment when, yourself a miracle, you are revealing to men the miracles of God? Is it not ungrateful? Oh no, Countess, I am grateful, but I do not so separate myself from my part that I could be happy while portraying the sufferings of my Redeemer. Do you imagine that I have merely learned the words by heart? With his form, I have also taken his cross upon me. Since that time all my youth has fled, and a touch of pain pervades my whole life. Then you are his true follower. Then you are doing what Simon of Cyrene did, and do you believe that you ought not to accept even the smallest portion of the gratitude which men owe to the crucified one? Must you share only his sufferings, not his joys, the joys bestowed by the love and faith of moved and converted souls? Surely if you are so narrow-minded, you understand neither yourself nor the love of God, who has chosen and favored you from among millions to renew to the world the forgotten message of salvation. O God, help me to keep my humility. This is too much. Freya started up and pressed his hand upon his brow as if to ward off an invisible crown which was descending upon it. The Countess also rose and approached him. Freya, the suffering you endure for Christ's sake, I share with you. It is the mystery in which our souls found each other. Pain is eternal, Freya, and that to which it gives birth is imperishable. What do we feel when we stand before a painted or sculptured image of the crucified one? Pity, the most agonizing pity. I have never been willing to believe it. But since yesterday, I have known that it is a solace to the believing soul to bestow a tender embrace upon the lifeless image and to touch the artificial wounds with ardent lips. What must it be when that image loves, feels, and suffers? When it speaks to us in tones that thrill the inmost heart, when we see it quiver and bleed under the lashes of the executioner, when the sweat of agony trickles from the brow and real tears flow from the eyes, I ask, what must this be to us? Imagine yourself for once the person who sees this, and then judge whether it is not overpowering. If faith in the stone Christ works miracles, why should not belief in the living one do far more? The pious delusion is so much the greater, and faith brings blessing. She clasped her hands upon his breast. Come, image of mercy, bend down to me. Let me clasp your beloved head and press upon your tortured brow the kiss of reconciliation for all penitent humanity. Then, taking his face between her hands, she lightly pressed a fervent kiss upon the brow gently inclined toward her. Now go and lament that you have robbed your master of this kiss. He will ask with a smile, do you know for whom that kiss was meant, thee or me? And you will be spared an answer, for when you raise your eyes to him, you will find it imprinted on his brow. She paused, overpowered by the sacredness of the moment. There are times when our own words influence us like some unknown force, because they express something which has been so deeply concealed in our hearts that we ourselves were ignorant of its existence. This was the case now with the Countess. Freya stood silently with clasped hands, as if in church. It seemed as though some third person was addressing them, an invisible person whom they must hold their very breath to understand. It had grown late. The waning moon floated high above the low window and brightened the little room with its cheering rays. The Countess nodded. "It is fulfilled." Then she laid her hands in Freya's. "For the first time since my childhood, I place my soul in the keeping of a human being. For the first time since my childhood, I strip off all the arrogance of reason, for a higher perception is hovering above me, drawing nearer and nearer with blissful certainty. Is it love? Is it faith? Whichever it may be, God dwells in both. And, if philosophy says, I think, therefore I am, I say, I love, therefore I believe." She humbly bowed her head. "And therefore I beseech you, bless me, you who are so divinely endowed, with the blessing which is shed upon and emanates from you." Freya raised his eyes to heaven as if to call down the benediction she implored, and there was such power in the fervid gaze that Madeleine von Wildenau experienced a thrill almost of fear, as if in the presence of some supernatural being. Then he made the sign of the cross over her, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. A tremor of foreboding ran through her limbs as if the finger of God had marked her for some mysterious destination, and, with this rune, she had been enrolled in the pallid host of those consecrated by sorrow as followers of the deity. With sweet submission she clasped the hand which had just imprinted the mournful sign on brow and breast. "In the name of God, if only you are near me." Her head drooped on her bosom. Someone knocked at the door. The Countess's brain reeled so much that she was forced to cling to Freya for support. Josepha timidly asked if she wanted a light. Light? Was it dark? "Very well," she answered absently. Josepha brought the lamp and inquired when the Countess desired to have supper. Freya took his hat to go. "I shall eat nothing more tonight," said the Countess in a curt, impatient tone, and Josepha timidly withdrew. Madeleine von Wildenau covered her face with both hands, like a person who had been roused from a beautiful dream to bare reality. Alas, that there must be other people in the world, besides ourselves. She sighed heavily, as if to take breath after the terrible fall. Freya, hat in hand, approached her, calm and self-controlled. Joseph Freya, addressing Countess Wildenau, had no remembrance of what the penitent soul had just confided to the image of the Redeemer. "Allow me to take my leave, Your Highness," he said in a gentle but distant tone. The Countess understood the delicate modesty of this conduct. Did your blue gentians teach this tact? It would seem that lonely pastures, whispering hazel copses, and dashing mountain streams are better educators of the heart for those who understand their mysterious language than many of our schools. Freya was silent a moment, then with eyes bent on the floor he said, "May I ask when Your Highness intends to leave tomorrow?" "Must I go, Freya?" "Your Highness, here is a telegram which announces my arrival at home tomorrow. Tell me, Freya, shall I send it?" "How can I decide?" stammered Freya in confusion. "I wish to know whether you, Freya, would like to keep me here." "But good heavens, Your Highness, is it seemly for me to express such a wish? Of course it will be a great pleasure to have you remain, but how could I seek to influence you in any way?" "Mere phrases," said the Countess, disappointed and offended. "Then, if it is a matter of indifference to you whether I go or stay, I will send the telegram." She went to the table to add something. Suddenly he stood close beside her, with a beseeching, tearful glance, and laid his hand upon the paper. "No, do not send it." "Not send it?" asked Madeleine in blissful expectation. "Not send it? Then, what am I to do?" His lips moved several times, as if he could not utter the word, but at last it escaped from his closed heart, and with an indescribable smile he murmured, "Stay!" "Ah!" A low cry of exultation escaped the Countess, and the telegram lay torn upon the table. Then with a trembling hand she wrote the second, which she requested him to send at once. It contained only the words, "Am ill, cannot come." He was still standing at her side, and she gave it to him to read. "Is it true?" he asked, after glancing at it, looking at her with timid, sportive reproach. "Are you ill?" "Yes," she said caressingly, laying her hand as if she felt a pang upon her heart. "I am. He clasped both in his own and asked softly in a tone which sent a thrill of happiness through every vein, "How shall we cure this illness?" She felt his warm breath on her waving hair and dared not stir. Then, with sudden resolution, he shook off the thrall. "Good night, Countess." The next moment he was hurrying past the window. Ludwig, wondering at his men's hasty departure, entered. "What has happened, Countess?" "Signs and wonders have happened," she said, extending her arms as if transfigured. Chapter 10. INTHE Early morning. Rise, Mary, night is darkening and the wintry storms are raging. But be comforted, in the early morning, in the spring garden you will see me again. The Countess woke from a short slumber as if someone had uttered the words aloud. She glanced around the dusky room. It was still early, scarcely a glimmer of light pierced through the chinks of the shutters. She tried to sleep again, but in vain. The words constantly rang in her ears. "In the early morning you will see me again." Now the chinks in the shutters grew brighter, and one golden arrow after another darted through. The Countess threw aside the coverlet and started up. Why should she torment herself with trying to court sleep? Outside a dewy garden offered its temptations. True, it was an autumn, not a spring garden. Yet for her it was spring. It had dawned in her heart. The first springtime of her life. Up and away. Should she wake Josepha, who slept above her? Nay, no sound, no word must disturb this sacred morning stillness. She dressed and, half an hour later, glided lightly, unseen, into the garden. The clock in the church steeple was striking 6. A fresh autumn breeze swept like a band of jubilant sprites through the tops of the ancient trees, then rushing downward, tossed her silken hair as though it would fain bear away the filmy strands to some envious wood nymph to weave nets from it for the poor mortals who might lose themselves in her domain. On the ground at her feet, too, the grasses and shrubs swayed and rustled as if little gnomes were holding high revel there. A strange mood pervaded all nature. Madeleine von Wildnau looked upward. There were huge cloud shapes in the sky, but the sun was shining brightly in a broad expanse of blue. The bells were ringing for early mass. The Countess clasped her hands. Everything was silent and lonely. No eye beheld, no ear heard her, save the golden orb above. The birds carolling their matin songs, the flowers whose cups were filled with morning dew, the buzzing, humming bees, all were celebrating the great matins of awakening nature, and she, whose heart was full of the morning dew of the first genuine feeling of her life, was she alone not to join in the chorus of gratitude of refreshed creation? There is a language whose key we do not possess. It is the Sanskrit of nature and of the human soul when it communes with the deity. The Countess sank silently down on the dewy grass. She did not pray in set words. There was an interchange of thought. Her heart spoke to God, and reason knew not what it confided to him. "In the early morning in the spring garden, thou wilt see me again." There again spoke the voice which had roused her so early. The Countess raised her head, but still remained kneeling as if spellbound. Before her stood the promised one. She could say nothing save the word uttered by Mary Magdalene. "Master!" A loving soul can never be surprised by the object of its love, because it expects him always and everywhere, yet it appears a miracle when its expectation becomes fulfillment. "Have I interrupted your prater?" "I did not see you because you were kneeling," he said gently. "You interrupt my prayer. You who first taught me to pray," she asked, holding out her hand that he might help her rise. "Tell me, how did you come here?" "I could not sleep. Some yearning urged me to your presence, to your garden." He gently raised her, while she gazed into his eyes as if enraptured. "Master!" she repeated. "Oh, my friend, I was like Mary Magdalene. My Lord had been taken away, and I knew not where they had laid him. Now I know. He was buried in my own heart, and the world had rolled the stone before it. But yesterday he rose, and the stone was cast aside. So some impulse urged me into the garden early this morning to seek him, and lo, he stands before me as he promised." "Do not speak so. I am well aware that the words are not meant for me, but if you associate Christ so closely with my personality, I fear that you will confound him with me, and that his image will be dimmed if anything should ever shadow mine. I beseech you, Countess, by all that is sacred, learn to separate him from me, or you have not grasped the true nature of Christ, and my work will be evil." He stood before her with hand uplifted in prophecy. The outlines of his powerful form were sharply relieved against the dewy, shining morning air. Purity, chastity, the loftiest, most inspired earnestness were expressed in his whole bearing, all the dignity of the soul and of primeval, divinely created human nature. Must not she have that feeling of adoration which always seizes upon us whenever, no matter where it may be, the deity is revealed in his creations? No. She did not understand what he meant. She only understood that there was something divine in him, and that the perception of this nearness to God filled her with a happiness never known before. Joseph Freya was the guarantee of the existence of a God in whom she had lost faith. Why should she imagine him in any other form than the one which she had found him again? Thou shalt make thyself no graven image. Must this puritanically misunderstood literal statement destroy man's dearest possession, the symbol of the reality? And the works of Raphael, Titian, and Rubens must be effaced, and the unions of miracles of faith wrought in the souls of the human race by the representations of the divine nature. O blessed image! Worship, now I understand your meaning, she joyously exclaimed. Whoever reviles you has never felt the ardent desire of the weak human heart, the captive of the senses, for contact with the unapproachable, the sight of the face of the ever-concealed, yet ever-felt divinity. Here stands the most perfect image heaven and earth ever created, and must I not kneel before it, clasp it with all the tendrils of my aspiring soul? No, no one ought, no one can prevent me. Half defiantly, half imploringly, the words poured from her inmost soul like molten lava. Let all misunderstand me. Save you, Freya. You, by whom God wrought the miracle, ought not to be narrow-minded. You ought not to destroy it for me, you least of all. Then she pleaded, appealed to him. Let saints, let glorified spirits grasp only the essence and dispense with the earthly pledge. I cannot. I am a type of the millions who live snared by the weaknesses, the ideas, the pleasures of the world of sense. Do you suddenly require of me the abstract purity and spiritualization of religious thought, to which only the highest innate or acquired perfection leads? Be forbearing to me. God has various ways of drawing the rebellious to him. To the soul which is capable of material ideas only, he gives revelations by the senses until, through pain and sorrow, it has worked its way upward to intellectual ones. And until I can behold the real God in his shadowy sphere, I shall cling lovingly and devoutly to his image. She sank on her knees before him in passionate entreaty. Do not destroy it for me, rather aid the pious delusion which is to save me. Bear patiently with the woe of a soul seeking its salvation, and leave the rest to God. She leaned her brow against the hand which hung by his side, and was silent from excess of emotion. The tall, stalwart man stood trembling, as Abraham may have stood before the thicket, when God stayed his uplifted arm and cried in tender love, I will not accept thy sacrifice. He had a presentiment that the victim would be snatched from him also, if he was too stern, and all the floods of his heart burst forth, all the floodgates of love and pity opened. Bending down, he held her head in a close, warm clasp between both hands, and touched her forehead with quivering lips. A low cry of unutterable bliss, and she sank upon his breast. The next instant she lifted her warm, rosy lips to his. But he drew back a step in agonizing conflict. No, Countess, for heaven's sake, no, it must not be. Why not? She asked, her face blanching. Let me remain worthy of the miracle God has wrought upon you through me. If I am to represent Christ to you, I must at least feel and think as he did, so far as my human weakness will permit, or everything will be a deception. The Countess covered her face with her hands. Ah, no one can utter such words who knows aught of love and longing, she moaned between her set teeth in bitter scorn. Do you think so? Exclaimed Freya, and the tone in which he spoke pierced her heart like a cry of pain. Drawing her hands from her face, he forced her to meet his glowing eyes. Look at me, and see whether the tears which now course down my cheeks express no love and longing. Look at yourself, your sweet, pouting lips, your sparkling eyes, all your radiant charms, and ask yourself whether a man into whose arms such a woman falls can remain unmoved. When you have answered these questions, say to yourself how that man must love his Saviour if he buys with such sacrifices the right to wear his crown of thorns. Perhaps you will then better understand what I said just now of the spirit and nature of Christ. Countess Madeline made no reply, but wringing her hands, bent her eyes on the ground. Have I wounded you, Countess? Yes, unto death, but it is best so. I understand you. If I am to love you as Christ, you must be Christ, and the more severe you are, the higher you raise me. Alas, the pain is keen." She pressed her hand upon her heart as though to close a wound. A pathetic expression of resignation rested on her pallid face. "Oh, Countess, do not make my task too hard for me. I am but mortal. Oh, how can I see you suffer? I can renounce everything, but to hurt you in doing so is beyond my power. Do not say you in this solemn hour. Call me by my name. I would fain hear it once from your lips. And what is your name? Maria Magdalena? No. You call yourself so under the impression of the Passion Play. I was christened Maria Magdalena von Frankenberg." "Maria Magdalena," he repeated, his eyes resting upon her with deep emotion as she stood before him. She, whose bearing was usually so haughty, now humble, silent, submissive, like the penitent before the master. Suddenly, overpowered by his feelings, he extended his arms. "My Magdalena, my master, my salvation," she sobbed, throwing herself upon his breast. He clasped her with a divine gesture of love in his embrace. "Oh God, she has flown hither like a frightened dove and nestled in my breast. Poor dove, I will conceal and protect you from every rude breeze, from every base touch of the world. Build your nest in my heart. Here you shall rest in the peace of God." He pressed her head close to his heart. "How you tremble, dove! May I call you so?" "Oh, forever. Are you wearied by your long flight, poor dove? Have you fluttered hither to me across the wild surges of the world, to bring the olive branch, the token of reconciliation, which makes my peace with things temporal and eternal? And must I now thrust you from me, saying as Christ said to Magdalene, 'Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father'? Shall I drive you forth again into this chaos, that the faithful wings which bore you on the right way may droop exhausted till you perish in the billows of the world?" He clasped her still more closely. "Oh God, this cannot be thy will. But I think I understand thee, omnipotent one. Thou hast entrusted this soul to me, and I will guard it for thee loyally." It was an hour of sacred happiness. Her head rested on his breast. Not a leaf stirred on the boughs. The dense shadow of the beeches surrounded them, separating them from the world, as if the universe contained naught save this one spot of earth and the dream of this moment. "Tell me one thing," she whispered, "only one, and I will suffer, atone, and purchase this hour of heaven by any sacrifice. Do you love me?" He looked at her, his whole soul in his eyes. "Must I tell you so?" he asked mournfully. "What can it serve you to put your hand into the wound in my heart and see how deep it is? You cannot cure it. Have you not felt, from the first moment, that some irresistible spell drew me to you, forcing me, the recluse, to come to you again and yet again? What was it that drove me from my couch early this morning and sent me hither to your closed house and deserted garden? What was it save love? Ever since 4 o'clock I have wandered restlessly about with my eyes fixed on the shutters of your room, till the impetuous longing of my soul roused you and drew you from your warm bed into the chill morning air. Come, you are shivering. Let me warm you, nestle in my arms and feel the glow of my heart." He sat down on the bench under the arbour, and he knew not how it happened. She clung to him like a child, and he could not repulse her, he could not. She stroked his long black locks with her little soft hand and rested her head against his cheek. She was the very embodiment of innocence, simplicity, girlish artlessness. And in low murmurs she poured out her whole heart to him, as a child confides in its father. Without reserve, she told him all the bitter sorrow of her whole life. A life which had never known either love or happiness. Having lost her mother when a mere child, she had been educated by a cold-hearted governess and a pessimistic tutor. Her father, wholly absorbed by the whirl of fashionable life, had cared nothing for her, and when scarcely out of the schoolroom had compelled her to marry a rich old man with whom for 8 years' existence was one long torment. Then, in mortal fear lest her listener would not forgive her, yet faithful to the truth, she confessed also how her eager soul, yearning for love, had striven to find some compensation, rebelling against a law which recognized the utmost immorality as moral, till sin itself seemed virtue compared to the wrong of such a bond. But as the forbidden draught did not quench her thirst, a presentiment came to her that she was longing for that spring of which Christ said, "But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst." This had brought her here, and here had been opened the purifying, redeeming fount of life and love. "Now you know all," My soul lies open before you by the self-denial with which I risked my highest blessing, yourself, and revealed my whole past life to you. You can judge whether I have been ennobled by your love." Slipping from his embrace, she sank on her knees before him. "Now, judge the penitent. I will accept from your hand whatever fate you may impose. But one thing I beseech you to do, whatever you may ask of me, remember Christ." Freya raised his large dark eyes. "I do remember him." Bending toward her with infinite gentleness, he lifted her in his strong arms. "Come, Magdalena, I cannot condemn you," he said, and the penitent again rested in the embrace of compassion. "There are drops of cold perspiration on your brow," said Madeleine after a long silence. "Are you suffering?" "I suffer gladly. Do not heed it," he said with effort. Then a glance of loving inquiry searched his inmost soul. "Do you regret the kiss which you just denied me?" she asked, scarcely above her breath, but the whispered question made him wince as though a probe had entered some hidden wound. She felt it, and some irresistible impulse urged her to again raise her pouting lips. He saw their rosy curves close to his own, and gently covered them with his hand. "Be true! Let us be loyal to each other. Do not make my lot harder than it is already. You do not know what you are unchaining." Starting up, he clasped his hands upon his breast, eagerly drinking in long draughts of the invigorating morning air. The gloomy fire which had just glowed in his eyes changed again to a pure, calm light. "This is so beautiful. Do not disturb it," he said gently, kissing her on the forehead. "My child, my dove, our love shall remain pure and sacred, shall it not?" "Yes," she murmured in reverent submission, for now he was once more the image of Christ, and she bent silently to kiss his hand. He did not resist, for he felt that it was a comfort to her. Then he disappeared, calm, lofty, like one who has stripped off the fetters of this world. Madeleine von Wildenau was left alone. Pressing her forehead against the trunk of the tree, a rude but firm support, she had sunk back upon the bench, closing her eyes. Her heart was almost bursting with its seething tide of emotion. Tears coursed down her cheeks. God had given her so much that she almost swooned under this wealth of happiness. Only a touch of pain could balance it, or it would be too great for mortal strength to bear. This pain was an unsatisfied yearning, a vague feeling that her destiny could only be fulfilled through this love, and that she was still so far from possessing it. God has ordained that the human heart can bear only a certain measure of happiness, and, when this limit is passed, joy becomes pain, because we are not to experience here on earth bliss which belongs to a higher stage of development. That is why the greatest joy brings tears. That is why, amid the utmost love, we believe that we have never loved enough. That is why, amid the excess of enjoyment, we are consumed with the desire for a rapture of which this is but a foretaste. That is why every pleasure teaches us to yearn for a new and greater one, so that we may never be satisfied, but continually suffer. There is but one power which, with strong hand, maintains the balance, teaches us to be sparing of joy, helps us endure pain, dams all the streams of desire, and sends them back to toil and bear fruit within the soul. Asceticism. It cuts with firm touch the luxuriant shoots from the tree of life, that its strength may concentrate within the marrow of the trunk, and urge the growth upward. Asceticism. The bugbear of all the grown-up children of this world. Wherever it appears, human hearts are in a tumult as if death were at hand. Like flying ants bearing away their eggs to a place of safety, the disturbed consciences of worldlings anxiously strive to hide their secret desires and pleasures from the dreaded foe. But whoever dares to meet its eyes sees that it is not the bugbear which the apostles of reason and nature would fain represent it, no fleshless, bloodless shadow which strives to destroy the natural bond between the Creator and creation, but a being with a glowing heart, 5 wounds, and a brow bedewed with drops of sweat. Its office is stern and gloomy, its labour severe and thankless, for it has to struggle violently with rebellious souls, and, save for the aid of the army of priests who have consecrated themselves to its service, it would succumb in the ceaseless struggle with materialism which is ever developing into higher consciousness. Yet whoever has once given himself to her service finds her a lofty, earnest, yet gracious goddess. She is the support of the feeble, the comforter of the unhappy and the solitary, the angel of the self-sacrificing. Whoever feels her hand upon a wounded, quivering heart knows that she is the benefactress, not the taskmistress of humanity. Nor does she always appear as the gloomy mourner beside the corpse of murdered joys. Sometimes roses wreathe the thorn-scarred brow, and she becomes the priestess of love. When the world and its self-created duties rudely sunders two hearts which God created for each other and leaves them to waste away in mortal anguish, she is the compassionate one. With sanctifying power, she raises the struggling souls above the dividing barrier of temporal things, teaches them to trample the earth under their feet, and unites them with an eternal bond in the purer sphere of intellectual love. Thus she unites what morality severs. Morality alone is harsh, not asceticism. Morality pitilessly prescribes her laws, unheeding the weakness of poor human hearts. Asceticism helps them to submit to them. Morality demands obedience. Asceticism teaches it. Morality punishes. Asceticism corrects. The former judges by appearances, the latter by the reality. Morality has only the reward of the world, asceticism of heaven. Morality made Mary Magdalene an outcast. Asceticism led her to the Lord and obtained his mercy for her. And as the beautiful Magdalene of the present day sat with closed eyes, letting her thoughts be swept along upon the wildly foaming waves of her hot blood, she fancied that the bugbear once so dreaded, because she had known it only under the guise of the fulfillment of base, loathsome duty, was approaching. But this time the form appeared in its pure beauty, bent tenderly over her, a pallid shape of light, and gazed at her with the eyes of a friend. Low, mysterious words, in boding mournful tones, were murmured in her ears. As she listened, her tears flowed more gently, and with childlike humility she clasped the sublime vision and hid her face on its breast. Then she felt upon her brow a chill kiss, like a breath from the icy regions of eternal peace, and the apparition vanished. But as the last words of something heard in a dream often echo in the ears of the person awaking, the Countess, as she raised her closed lids, remembered nothing save the 3 words, "On the cross." Chapter 11. M-A-Y-A-N-D, Magdalene. On the cross. Was it a consolation or a menace? Who could decipher this rune? It was like all the sayings of oracles. History would explain its meaning, and when this was done, it would be too late, for it would be fulfilled. The Countess still sat motionless in the old arbour. Her destiny had commenced on the cross, that was certain. Hitherto, she had been a blind blank, driven like thousands by the wheel of chance. She had first entered into communication with the systematic order of divine thought in the hour when she saw Joseph Freya on the cross. Will her fate end as it began, upon the cross? An icy chill ran through her veins. She loved the cross, since it bore the man whom she loved. But what farther influence was it to have upon her life? And what had pallid asceticism to do with her? What was the source of all these oppressive, melancholy forebodings, which could only be justified if a conflict with grave duties or constraining circumstances was impending? Why should they not love each other? Both were free. But she not only desired to love him, she wished to be his, to claim him hers. Every loving woman longs for the fulfillment of her destiny in the man she loves. How was she to obtain this fulfillment? What is born in morality cannot exist in immorality. He knew this, felt it, and it was the cause of his sternness. This was the source of her grief, the visit of the mysterious comforter, and the warning of the cross. But must the brightest happiness, the beautiful bud of love, wither on the cross, because it grew there? Was there no other sacred soil where it might thrive and develop to the most perfect flower? Was there no wedding altar, no sacrament of marriage? She drew back as if she suddenly stood on the verge of a yawning abyss. Her brain reeled. A throng of jeering spectres seemed grinning at her, watching with malicious delight the leap the Countess Wildenau was about to take, down to a peasant. She involuntarily glanced around, as if someone might have been listening to the thought. But all was still and silent. Her secret, thank heaven, was still her own. "Eternal Providence, what fate hast thou in store for me?" her questioning gaze asked the blue sky. What was the meaning of this extraordinary conflict? She loved Freya as the god whom he represented, yet he could be hers only as a man. She must either resign him or the divine illusion. She felt that the instant which made him hers as a man would break the spell, and she would no longer love him. The god was too far above her to be drawn down to her level. The man was too low to be raised to it. As ever mortal woman, thus placed between two alternatives and told, "Choose." The golden shower fell into Danae's lap. The swan flew to lead her. The bull bore Europa away, and Jupiter did not ask. In what form do you wish me to appear? But to the higher consciousness of the Christian woman, the whole responsibility of free choice is given. And what is the reward of this torturing dilemma? If she chooses the God, she must resign the man. If she chooses the man, she must sacrifice the God. Which can she renounce, which relinquish? She could not decide, and wrung her hands in agony. Why must this terrible discord be hers? Had she ventured too boldly into the sphere of divine life, that, as if in mockery, she was given the choice between the immortal and the mortal in order, in the struggle between the two, to recognize the full extent of her weakness? It seemed so. As if utterly wearied by the sore conflict, she hid her face in her hands and called to her aid the one comforter who had just approached so tenderly. But in vain, the revelations were silent. The deity would not aid her. "You ought to go up the mountain today, Countess," called a resonant voice. This time no pale phantom, no grimacing spectre stood before her, but her friend Ludwig, who gazed into her eyes with questioning sympathy. She clasped his hand. "Whenever you approach me, my friend, I can never help receiving you with a thank heaven. You are one of those whose very presence is beneficial to the sufferer, as the physician's entrance often suffices to soothe the patient without medicines." Ludwig sat down on the bench beside the Countess. "My sisters and Josepha are greatly troubled because you have not yet ordered breakfast, and no one ventured to ask. So I undertook the dangerous commission, and your Highness can see yonder at the door how admiringly my sisters' eyes are following me." The Countess laughed. "Dear me, am I so dreaded a tyrant?" "No doubt you are a little inclined to be one," replied Ludwig quizzically. "Now and then a sharp point juts from a hidden coronet. I felt one myself yesterday." "When? How? May I remind you of it?" "Certainly. When you poured all your wrath upon poor Freya and resolved to leave Ammergau at once." Then I was puzzled for a moment. "Really?" said the Countess with charming embarrassment. "Then I was not mistaken. I perceived it, and therefore delayed sending the telegram. People ought not to take such passing ebullitions so seriously." "Yes, Countess, but that passing ebullition might have made poor Freya miserable for a long time. Pray, have more patience and tolerance in future. Natures so powerful and superior as yours fail to exert a destructive influence upon a circle of simple folk like ourselves, only when they show a corresponding degree of generosity, which suffices to excuse all our awkwardnesses. Otherwise you will some day thrust us down from the height to which you have raised us, and that would be far worse than if we had never been withdrawn from our modest sphere." "You are right," said the Countess thoughtfully. "My fear is that we are capable only of rousing your interest, not fixing it. We are on too unequal a footing, we feel and understand your spell, but are too simple and inexperienced not to be dazzled and confused by its ever-varying phantasmagoria. Therefore, Countess, you are as great a source of peril as of happiness." I understand. But suppose that for the sake of you, people of Ammergau, I desired to return to plainness and simplicity." "You cannot, Countess, you are too young." "What do you mean? That would be the very reason I should be able to do so." "No, for you have passed the age when people easily accommodate themselves to new circumstances. Too many of the shoots of luxury have gained a generous growth. They will assert their claims and cannot be forced back into the seeds whence they came. Not until they have lived out their time in the world and died can they form the soil for a new, and, if you desire it, more primitive and simple development. Any premature attempt of this kind will last only a few moments, and even these would be a delusion. But what to you would be passing moments of disappointment, to those who shared them would be lifelong destiny. Our clumsy natures cannot make these graceful oscillations from one feeling to another. We stake all on one and lose it, if we are deceived." The Countess looked earnestly at him. "You are a stern monitor, Ludwig Gross," she said thoughtfully. "Do you fear that I might play a game with one of you?" "An unconscious one, Countess, as the waves toy with a drifting boat." "Well, that would at least be no cruel one," replied the lady, smiling. "Any sport, Countess, would be cruel, which tore one of these calm souls from its quiet haven here and set it adrift rudderless on the high sea of passion." He rose. "Pardon me, I am taking too much liberty." "Not more than my friendship gave you a right to say. You brought your friend to me. You are right to warn me if you imagine I should heedlessly throw the priceless gift away. But Ludwig Gross," she took his hand, "do you know that I prize it so highly that I should not consider myself too great a recompense? Do you know that you have just found me in a sore struggle over this problem? Ludwig Gross drew back a step as if he could not grasp the full meaning of the words. So momentous did they seem that he turned pale. "Is it possible?" he stammered. A tremulous gesture of the hand warned him to say no more. "I don't know whether it is possible, but that I could even think of it will enable you to imagine what value your gift possesses for me. Not a word, I beseech you. Give me time, and trust me. So many marvels have been wrought in me during the past few days that I give myself up to the impulse of the moment and allow myself to be led by an ever-ruling providence. I shall be dealt with kindly." Ludwig, deeply moved, kissed his companion's hand. "Countess, the impulse which moves you at this moment must unconsciously thrill every heart in Ammergau, as the sleeping child feels, even in its dreams, when a good fairy approaches its cradle. And it is indeed so, for, in you, conscious culture approaches unconscious nature. It is a sublime moment when the highest culture, like the fairy beside the cradle, listens to the breathing of humanity, where completion approaches the source of being, and drinks from it fresh vigour." "Yes," cried the Countess enthusiastically, "that is it. You understand me perfectly. All civilization must gain new strength from the fountain of nature, or its sources of life would become dry, for they perpetually derive their nourishment from that inexhaustible maternal bosom. Where this is not accomplished in individual lives, the primeval element, thus disowned, avenges itself in great social revolutions, catastrophes which form epochs in the history of the world. It is only a pity that in such phases of violent renewal, the labour of whole epochs of civilization is lost. Therefore, souls in harmony with their age must try to reconcile peacefully what, taken collectively, assumes the proportions of contrast destructive to the universe." "And where could we find this reconciliation, save in love?" cried Ludwig enthusiastically. "You express it exactly. That is the perception toward which minds are more and more impelled, and whose outlines in art and science appear more and more distinctly. That is the secret of the influence of Parsifal, which extends far beyond the domain of art, and, in another province, the success of the Passion Play. To one it revealed itself under one guise, to another under another. To me it was here that the very source of love appeared, and as you, who revealed it to me, are pervaded by the great lesson, I will test it first upon you. Brother, friend, I will aid you in every strait and calamity, and you shall see that I exercise love, not only in words, but that the power working within me will accomplish deeds also." She clasped her hands imploringly. "And if I love one of you more than the others, do not blame me. The nearer to the focus of light, the stronger the heat. He, that one, is surely the focus of the great light which, emanating from you, illumines the whole world. I am so near him. Could I remain cold? Ah, Countess, now I will cast aside all fears for my friend. In heaven's name, take him. Even if he consumes under your thrall. Pain, too, is godlike, and to suffer for you is a grand, a lofty destiny, 1,000-fold fairer and better than the dull repose of an everyday happiness." "Good heavens! When have I ever heard such language?" exclaimed the Countess, gazing admiringly at the modest little man, whose cheeks were glowing with the flush of the loftiest feeling. He stood before her in his plain working clothes, his clear-cut profile uplifted, his eyes raised with a searching gaze as if pursuing the vanishing traces of a lofty, unattainable goal. She rose. "There is not a day, not an hour here, which does not bring me something grand. Woe befall me if I do not show myself worthy of the obligation your friendship imposes. I should be more guilty than those to whom the summons of the ideal has never come, who have never stood face to face with men like you." Ludwig quietly held out his hand and clasped hers closely in her own. The piercing glance of his artist, I seemed to read the inmost depths of her soul. After a long pause, Madeleine von Wildenau interrupted the silence. "There stands your sister in great concern over my bodily welfare. Well then, let us remember that we are human. Unfortunately, will you breakfast with me?" "I thank you. I have already breakfasted," said Ludwig, modestly motioning to Seffi to be ready. "Then at least bear me company." Taking his arm, she went with him to the arbour covered with a wild grapevine where the table was spread. She sat down to the simple meal, while her companion served her with so much tact and grace that she could not help thinking involuntarily, "And these are peasants? What ought we aristocrats to be?" Then, as if in mockery of this reflection, a man in his shirt-sleeves with his jacket flung over his arm and a scythe in his hand passed down the street by the fence. "Freya!" exclaimed the Countess, her face aflame, "the Messiah with a scythe." Freya stopped. "You called me, Countess. Where are you going with that implement, Herr Freya?" she asked coldly, in evident embarrassment. "To mow my field," he answered quietly. "I have just time, and I want to try to harvest a little hay. Almost everything goes to ruin during the Passion. But why do you cut it yourself?" "Because I have no servant, Countess," said Freya, smiling, raised his hat with the dignified gesture characteristic of him, and moved on as firmly and proudly as though the business he was pursuing was worthy of a king. And so it was when he pursued it. A second blush crimsoned Madeleine von Wildnau's fair forehead. But this time it was because she had been ashamed of him for a moment. Poor Freya! His little patrimony was a patch of ground, and should it be accounted a degradation that he must receive the scanty gift of nature directly from her hand, or rather win it blade by blade in the sweat of his brow? So she reasoned. Then he glanced back at her, and she felt that the look, outshining the sun, had illuminated her whole nature. The fiery greeting of a radiant soul. She waved her white hand to him, and he again raised his hat. "Where is Freya's field?" "Not far from us, just outside the village. Would you like to go there?" "No, it would trouble me. I should not like to see him toiling for his daily bread. Men such as he ought not to find it necessary, and it must end in some way. God sent me here to equalize the injustice of fate." "You cannot accomplish this with Freya, Countess. He would have been a rich man long ago, if he had been willing to accept anything. What do you imagine he has had offered by ladies who, from sacred and selfish motives, under the influence of his personation of the Christ, were ready to make any sacrifice? If ever poverty was an honour to a man, it is to Freya, for he might have been in very different circumstances, and instead is content with a little property received from his father, a bit of woodland, a field, and a miserable little hut. To keep the nobility and freedom of his soul, he toils like a servant, and cares for house, field, and wood with his own hands. Just see him now, Countess," he added. "You have never beheld any man look more aristocratic while at work than he, though he only wields a scythe." "You are a loyal friend, Ludwig Gross," she answered. "And an eloquent advocate. Come, take me to him." She hurried into the house, returning with a broad-brimmed hat on her head, which made her face look as blooming and youthful as a girl's. Long, undressed kid gloves covered her arms under the half-flowing sleeves of her gown, and she carried over her shoulder a scarlet sunshade which surrounded her whole figure with a roseate glow. There was a warmth, a tempting charm in her appearance like the velvety bloom of a ripe peach. Ludwig Gross gazed at her in wonder. "You are fatally beautiful," he involuntarily exclaimed, shaking his head mournfully, as we do when we see some inevitable disaster approaching a friend. "No one ought to be so beautiful," he added disapprovingly. Madeleine von Wildnau laughed merrily. "Oh, you comical friend, who offers with so sour a visage the most flattering compliments possible. Our young society men might take lessons from you. Pardon me for laughing," she said apologetically, as Ludwig's face darkened. "But it came so unexpectedly, I was not prepared for such a compliment here." And in spite of herself, she laughed again. The compliment was too irresistible. Her companion was deeply offended. He saw in this outbreak of mirth a levity which outraged his holiest feelings. These were the graceful oscillations from one mood to another, as he had termed it that day, which he had so dreaded for his friend, and which now perplexed his own judgment. A moment was sufficient to reveal this to the Countess. In the next she had regained her self-control, and with it the power of adapting herself to the earnestness of her friend's mood. He was walking silently at her side with a heavy heart. There had been something in that laugh which he could not fathom, readily as he grasped any touch of humour. To the earnest woman he had seen that morning, he would have confided his friend in the belief that he was fulfilling a lofty destiny. To the laughing, coquettish woman of the world, he grudged him. Joseph Freya was far too good for such a fate. They had walked on, each absorbed in thought, leaving the village behind, into the open country. Few people were at work, for during the Passion there is rarely time to till the fields. "There he is," Ludwig pointed to a man swinging his scythe with a powerful arm. The Countess had dreaded the sight, yet now stood watching full of admiration, for these movements were as graceful as his gestures. The natural symmetry, which was one of his characteristic qualities, rendered him a picturesque figure even here, while toiling in the fields. His arms described rhythmically returning circles so smoothly. The poise of the elastic body, bending slightly forward, was so noble, and he performed the labor so easily that it seemed like a graceful gymnastic exercise for the training of the marvelous limbs. The Countess gazed at him a long time, unseen. A woman's figure, bearing a jug, approached from the opposite side of the meadow and offered Freya a drink. "I have brought some milk. You must be thirsty, it is growing warm," the Countess heard her say. She was a gracious-looking woman, clad in simple country garb, evidently somewhat older than Freya, but with a noble virginal bearing and features of classic regularity. Every movement was dignified, and her expression was calm and full of kindly earnestness. "I ought to know her," said the Countess in a strangely sharp tone. "Certainly. She is the mother of God in the Passion play, Anastasia Gross, the burgomaster's sister." "Yes, the Mary," said the Countess, and again she remembered how the two, mother and son, had remained clasped in each other's arms far longer than seemed to her necessary. What a known pang was this which now pierced her heart. "I suppose they are betrothed?" she asked with quickened breath. "Who can tell? We think she loves him, but no one knows Freya's feelings," said Ludwig. "I don't understand, since you are such intimate friends, why you should not know." "I believe, Countess, if we people of Ammergau have any good quality, it is discretion. We do not ask, even the most intimate friend, anything which he does not confide to us." Madeleine von Wildenau lowered her eyes in confusion. After a short struggle, she said with deadly sternness and bitterness, "You were right this morning. The man must be left in his sphere. Come, let us go back." A glance from Ludwig's eyes pierced her to the heart. She turned back toward the village. But Freya had already seen her and overtook her with the speed of thought. "Why, Countess, you here, and—" His eyes, fierce with pain, rested inquiringly on hers as he perceived their cold expression. "And you were going to leave me without a word of greeting? Were you ashamed to speak to the poor peasant who was mowing his grass? Or did my dress shock you?" He was so perfectly artless that he did not even interpret her indignation correctly, but attributed it to an entirely different cause. This did not escape the keen intuition of a woman so thoroughly versed in affairs of the heart. But when a drop of the venom of jealousy has entered the blood, it requires some time ere it is absorbed, even though the cause of the mischief has long been removed. This is an old experience, as well as the fact that, this process once over, repentance is all the sweeter, love the more passionate. But the poor simple-hearted peasant, in his artlessness, could not perceive all this. He was merely ashamed of standing before the Countess in his shirt-sleeves, and hurriedly endeavoured, with trembling fingers, to fasten his collar, which he had opened while at work, baring his throat and chest. It seemed as if the hot blood could be heard pulsing against the walls of his arched chest, like the low murmur of the sea. The labour, the increasing heat of the sun, and the excitement of the Countess' presence had quickened the usually calm flow of his blood till it fairly seethed in his veins, glowing in roseate life through the ascetic pallor of the skin, while the swelling veins stood forth in 1,000 beautiful waving lines, like springs welling from white stone. Both stood steeped in the fervid warmth, one absorbing, the other reflecting it. But with the cruelty of love, which seeks to measure the strength of responsive passion by the very pain it has the power to inflict, the beautiful woman curbed the fire kindled in her own pulses and said carelessly, "We have interrupted your tête-à-tête. We will make amends by retiring." "Countess," he exclaimed with a look which seemed to say, "is it possible that you can be so unjust? My mother, Mary, was with me. She brought her son something to refresh him at his work. Why should you interrupt us?" The simple words, which to her had so subtle a double meaning, explained everything, and Madeleine von Wildenau felt, with deep embarrassment, that he understood her, and that she must appear very petty in his eyes. Ludwig Gross drew out his watch. "Excuse me, it is 9 o'clock. I must go to my drawing school." He bowed and left them, without shaking hands with the Countess as usual. She felt it as a rebuke, and a voice in her heart said, "You must become a far better woman ere you are worthy of this man." "Would not you like to know Mary? May I introduce her to you?" asked Freya when they were alone. "Oh, it is not necessary." "Why, how can you love the son and not care for the mother?" "She is not your mother," replied the Countess, "and I am not the Christ." "Why does the illusion affect me, and not Mary?" "Because it was perfect in you, but not in her." "Then there is still more reason to know her, that her personality may complete what her personation lacked." The Countess cast a gloomy look at the tall maiden, who meanwhile had taken the scythe and was doing Freya's work. "She seems to be very devoted to you. she said suspiciously. Yes, thank heaven we are loyal friends. I suppose you call each other thou? Yes, all the Ammergau people do that when they have been schoolmates. That is a strange custom. Is it practiced by those in both high and low stations? There are neither high nor low stations among us. We all stand on the same footing, Countess. The fact that one is richer, another poorer, that one can do more for education and external appearances than his neighbour makes. No difference with us, and, if it did, it would be an honour for me to be permitted to address Anastasia with the familiar thou, for she and the whole gross family are far above me. Even in your sense of the word, Countess. The burgomaster is an aristocrat, no child of nature like myself, but a man familiar with social usages and thoroughly well educated. Well then, cried the Countess, why don't you marry the lady, if she possesses such superior advantages? Marry? Freya started back as if instead of Madeleine's beautiful face he had suddenly beheld some hideous vision. I have never thought of it. Why not? The Christ wed Mary? The Son, the Mother? No, though we are not what we represent, that would be impossible. I have become so accustomed to regard her as my mother that it would seem to me a profanation. But next winter, when the play is over, it will be different. And you say this to me, Countess, you, after this morning, cried Freya with a trembling voice. Are you in earnest? Certainly. I cannot expect you for my sake to neglect older claims upon your heart. Countess, if I had older claims, would I have spoken to you as I did today, would the events have occurred which happened today? Can you believe such things of me? You are silent. Well, Countess, that may be the custom in your circle, but not in mine. Forgive me, Freya, stammered the lady, turning pale. Freya shaded his eyes with his hand as if the sun dazzled him, in order to conceal his rising tears. For what are you looking? Asked the Countess, who thought he was trying to see more distinctly. He turned his face, eloquent with pain, full toward her. I was looking to see where my dove had flown. I can no longer find her. Or was it all a dream? Freya! Cried the Countess, utterly overwhelmed, slipping her hand through his arm and resting her head without regard for possible spectators on his heaving breast. Joseph, your dove has not flown away. She is here. Take her to your heart again and keep her forever, forever, if you wish. Take care, Countess, said Freya warningly. There are people moving in all directions. She raised her head. Will it cause you any harm? She asked, abashed. Not me, but you. I have no one to question me and could only be proud of your tokens of favour. But consider what would be said in your own circle if it were rumoured that you had rested your head on a peasant's breast. You are no peasant, you are an artist. In your eyes, but not in those of the world. Even though we do passably well in wood-carving and in the passion play, so long as we are so poor that we are compelled to till our fields ourselves and bring the wood for our carvings from the forest with our own hands, we shall be ranked as peasants, and no one will believe that we are anything else. You will be blamed for having associated with such uncultured people. Oh, I will answer for that before the whole world. That would avail little, my beloved one. Heaven forbid that I should ever so far forget myself as to boast of your love before others, or permit you to do anything which they would misjudge. God alone understands what we are to each other, and therefore it must remain hidden in his bosom, where no profane eye can desecrate it. The Countess clung closer to him in silent admiration. She remembered so many annoyances caused by the indiscretions due to the vanity of men whom she had favoured, that this modest delicacy seemed so chivalrous and lofty that she would fain have fallen at his feet. Dove, have I found you again? He said, gazing into her eyes. My sweet, naughty dove, you will never more wound and wrong me so. I feel that you might break my heart, and pressing her arm lightly to his side, he raised her hand to his burning lips. A glow of happiness filled Madeleine von Wildnau's whole being as she heard the stifled, passionate murmur of love. And as, with every sunbeam, the centifolia blooms more fully, revealing a new beauty with each opening petal, so too did the soul of the woman thus illumined by the divine ray of true love. Come, she said suddenly, take me to the kind creature who so tenderly ministers to you, perhaps suffers for you. I now feel drawn toward her, and will love her for your sake as your mother, Mary. Ah, my child, that is worthy of you. I knew that you were generous and noble. Come, my Magdalene, I will lead you to Mary. They walked rapidly to the field where Anastasia was busily working. The latter, seeing the stranger approach, let down the skirt she had lifted and adjusted her dress a little, but she received the Countess without the least embarrassment and cordially extended her hand. Her bearing also had a touch of condescension, which the great lady especially noticed. Anastasia gazed so calmly and earnestly at her that she lowered her eyes as if unable to bear the look of this serene soul. The smoothly brushed brown hair, the soft, indistinctly marked brows, the purity of the features, and the virginal dignity throned on the noble forehead harmonized with the ideal of the Queen of Heaven, which the Countess had failed to grasp in the Passion Play. She was beautiful, faultless from head to foot, yet there was nothing in her appearance which could arouse the least feeling of jealousy. There was such spirituality in her whole person. Something. The Countess could not describe it in any other way, so expressive of the sober sense of age that the beautiful woman was ashamed of her suspicion. She now understood what Freya meant when he spoke of the maternal relation existing between Anastasia and himself. She was the true Madonna, to whom all eyes would be lifted devoutly, reverently, yet whom no man would desire to press to his heart. She was probably not much older than the Countess, 2 or 3 years at most, but compared with her, the great lady, so thoroughly versed in the ways of the world, was but an immature, impetuous child. The Countess felt this with the secret satisfaction which it affords every woman to perceive that she is younger than another, and it helped her to endure the superiority which Anastasia's lofty calmness maintained over her. Nay, she even accepted the inferior place with a coquettish artlessness which made her appear all the more youthful. Yet at the very moment she adopted the childish manner, she secretly felt its reality. She was standing in the presence of the Mother of God. Womanly nature had never possessed any charm for her. She had never comprehended it in any form. She had never admired any of Raphael's Madonnas, not even the Sistine. A woman interested her only as the object of a man's love for which she might envy her. The contrary character, the ascetic beauty of an immaculate, was wholly outside of her sphere. Now, for the first time in her life, she was interested in a personality of this type, because she suddenly realized that the Virgin was also the mother of the Saviour. And as her love for the Christ was first awakened by her love for Joseph Freya, her reverence for Mary was first felt when she thought of her as his mother. Madeleine von Wildenau, so poor in the treasures of the heart, the woman who had never been a mother, suddenly felt, even while in the act of playing with practised coquetry, the part of childlike ignorance. Under the influence of the man she loved, the reality in the farce and her heart opened to the sacred mysterious bond between the mother and the child. Thus, hour by hour, she grew out of the captivity of the world and the senses, gently supported and elevated by the might of that love which reconciles earth and heaven. She held out one hand to Anastasia, the other to Freya. "I too would fain know the dear mother of our Christ," she said, with that sweet, submissive grace which the moment had taught her. Freya's eyes rested approvingly upon her. She felt as if wings were growing on her shoulders. She felt that she was beautiful, good, and beloved. Earth could give no more. Anastasia watched the agitated woman with the kindly, searching gaze of a sister of charity. Indeed, her whole appearance recalled that of one of these ministering spirits, resigned without sentimentality, gentle, yet energetic, modest, yet impressive. I felt a great— the Countess was about to say admiration. But this was not true. She admired her now for the first time. She stopped abruptly in the midst of her sentence. She could utter no stereotyped compliments at this moment. With quiet dignity, like a princess giving audience, Anastasia came to her assistance by skillfully filling up the pause. "So this is your first visit to Oberammergau?" "Yes." "Then you have doubtless been very much impressed?" "Oh, who could remain cold while witnessing such a spectacle?" "Yes, is not our Christ perfect?" said Anastasia, smiling proudly. "He costs people many tears, but even I cannot help weeping, and I have played it with him 30 times. She passed her hand across his brow with a tender, maternal caress, as if she wished to console him for all his sufferings. "Does it not seem as if we saw the Redeemer himself?" The Countess watched her with increasing sympathy. "You have a beautiful soul. Your friend was right. People should know you to receive the full impression of Mary." "Yes, I play it too badly," replied Anastasia, whose native modesty prevented her recognition of the flattery conveyed in the Countess' words. "No, badly is not the word, but the delicate shadings of the feminine nature are lost in the vast space," the other explained. "It may be so," replied Anastasia simply, "but that is of no importance. No matter how we others might play, he would sustain the whole." "And your brother, Anastasia, and all the rest, do you forget them?" said Freya, rebukingly. "Yes, dear Anastasia." The Countess took Freya's hand. I have given my soul into the keeping of this Christ, but your brother's performance is also a masterpiece. It seems to me that you are unjust to him, and also to Pilate, whom I admired, the apostles and high priests." "Perhaps so. I don't know how the others act," said Mary with an honesty that was fairly sublime. "I see only him. And when he is not on the stage, I care nothing for the rest of the performance. It is because I am his mother. To a mother the son is beyond everything else," she added calmly. The Countess looked at her in astonishment. Was it possible that a woman could love in this way? Yet there was no doubt of it. Had even a shadow of longing to be united to the man she loved rested on the soul of this girl, she could not have had thus crystalline transparency and absolute freedom from embarrassment. These Madonnas are happy beings, she thought, yet she did not envy this calm peace. Drawing off her long glove with much difficulty, she took a ring from her finger. "Please accept this from me as a token of the secret bond which unites us in love for your son. We will be good friends." "With all my heart," said Anastasia in delight, holding out her sunburnt finger to receive the gift. "What will my brother say when I come home with such a present?" She gratefully kissed the donor's hand. "You are too kind, Countess. I don't know how I deserve it." She stooped and lifted her jug. "I must go home now to help my sister-in-law. You will visit us, won't you? My brother will be so pleased." "Very gladly, if you will allow me," replied the lady, smiling. "I beg you to do so," said Anastasia with ready tact. Then, with noble dignity, she moved away across the fields, waving her hand from the distance to the couple she had left behind, as if to say, "Be happy."